Okay, well, welcome to English 250, Introduction to Literary Studies. I am your professor, Jeff Glock, and I'm going to be making stacks of these videos, just stacks of them, um, as we do English 250, Introduction to Literary Studies. So, all right, welcome to class. I hope you like this thing. I try to, as a teacher, I try to keep everything sort of minimal. I try to give you guys as little to do as possible, and I just want to be I want to my goal when I'm doing things is always to sort of figure out the essence of things, and kind of move forward. So what this class is essentially to understand, like, teachers have you do quizzes and there's a lot of bells and whistles and nonsense, but here's what the class is. This is a course that is designed for English majors to sort of have you think about different ways to look at art. All semester long, I'm going to be saying art. And when I say art, what I mean is plays and poems and novels and sculptures and like a whole range of things. English doesn't have a good word for creative works. In German there's like a word that means like, because if I say art, people just assume I mean painting or sculpture. But like, no, I also mean plays and poems, and so there's not really a good word. Creative work. Um, what this course is it's different ways of looking at creative works, um, and different kind of philosophies. If you took 101, actually, you definitely took 101. So if you took 101, you know that one of the things that happens in 101 is that you read a bunch of nonfiction. And I imagine it's sort of like philosophy. They may not call it that. They're thinkers, but they're sort of doing philosophy type stuff in 101. I don't know what your 101 teacher had you read, but it's nonfiction. And a lot of times it does include philosophy things. In fact, the very first thing we're going to be reading in this class may be something that you already came across in 101. It's a I like famous shit, so it's like a very famous thing. It's by Plato. We'll talk about it in a second. Um, so what this course does is it's different ways of looking at art. Um, so 101 is like philosophy, kind of. You do thinkers in philosophy. And 201, which you may be taking now or you may already have taken, 201 is a class where you learn to study plays and poems and novels and short stories and that kind of thing. It's a little confusing too because like I feel like 201 is like Introduction to Literature, and this class 250 for English majors, for writing and literature majors, I should say, for writing and literature majors is Introduction to Literary Studies. Introduction to Literary Studies sounds almost exactly the same as Introduction to Literature. What is the difference? Um, the difference is that Introduction to Literature, English 201, teaches you sort of the basics about how to think about plays and poems and novels and stuff. Um, what this class does is it almost combines 101 and 201 together, because if in 101 you got philosophy and in 201 you got literature, what we're doing in here is the philosophy of literature. It's sort of like, what do philosophers have to say about literature and painting and sculpture and all this kind of stuff. So that's what the course is. So let's talk about what it's going to look like. So for starters, we're going to be looking at, I don't know how many, I don't know how many we'll get through, but my plan is to try to do something like 15, 16 different philosophers. Each philosopher is going to have a different perspective on what the whole point of art is. Most people, like everyday people in the world, generally only have like one or two ways of thinking about art. Um, and that's usually, they think that's enough for them. I don't think it's enough for them, but of course I don't. I'm a literature professor, so it's ridiculous. But they think that's enough. Most people have one or two ways of looking at art, and they're pretty straightforward. When a normal person, an everyday person, looks at a work of art, one of the most common things you'll hear them say, they want to know, is it realistic? So they'll watch a movie, and then when the movie's over, you say, what do you think of the movie? And they go, it didn't make sense. Or that person, it's unrealistic. That's not what lawyers really do. That's not what I'm a cop, and that's not what cops are really like. So that's one of the main things, is they want to know, is it realistic? And if it's not realistic, there's been a mistake and something's gone wrong. And if it is realistic, or if it does make sense, then something has gone right. And a lot of conversations about movies and TV shows and literature revolves around a kind of, well, is it realistic or not? And they talk about, do we think, does Superman's powers make sense or whatever? Yeah, and then some people be like, oh, actually, there's like physics behind it. And these are folks who, that's one of the main two things. People want realistic art. Um, like if you think about a drawing, if you do a drawing and it looks just like the person, um, if you do a drawing and it looks just like the person, then they feel like it's good. And if it doesn't look just like the person, then they feel like something has gone wrong. So that's basically where we are. So what we're doing in this class is expanding on that. We're trying to make it bigger. So instead of just having one or two ways of thinking about art, we're going, oh, and the other thing people have is that art is an emotional expression of the author. So if people read a poem, they tend to think, well, the artist, the person, the poet, got broken up, or the musician got broken up with, or they got dumped. And so if they're thinking about what is the point of a poem or what is the point of a song, they tend to anchor it to, oh, it's about the emotional state of the person who made it. So this person got dumped, they felt very sad, and they expressed themselves in the work of art. I also want to be clear, I'm not making fun of these two things. These are perfectly smart things to say about art, and in fact, I will give you a philosopher about each of those things. So we will be spending time thinking about those two ways of thinking about art, as either, is it realistic or not? And does it reflect the emotional state? It's an emotional expression, like therapy, of the artist. And these are things that people think about art, and there's philosophers to go with them, and we'll look at those too. But we're also going to look at like 14 other people who are going to have other things to say about art. Because if you've ever been to an art museum, sometimes you go in an art museum and just everything is weird. Like a modern art museum. You go to a modern art museum and you look at this stuff and you're like, I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. What's going on in this thing? So you look at this stuff and you don't know. One of the reasons why art and museum is so confusing is because if you only go in the museum with like one or two ways of looking at art, like emotional expression or is it realistic, you're going to bump into a bunch of art that doesn't do either one of those things. And so you look at it and you go, I don't get it. This is confusing. This is ridiculous. I don't understand what's going on. What you need is other ways of thinking about art. And then that way you can understand what's happening. Because because emotional expression of the author and is it realistic is not those aren't enough tools in the toolbox. You want to do a job, you want to understand a work of art, you're going to need some tools. Most people have very few tools to understand what art is doing. The purpose of this class is it's going to give you more tools for thinking about these things. And so we're going to look at 14 or 15 different philosophers. I'm going to give you like 2 pages by each of them. So it's not even like a ton of reading, although it is very difficult reading. But it's short. It's not a ton of reading. And you're probably going to read like 30 pages. It's not that big a deal. And we're going to go over it line by line, word by word. We're going to go through these philosophers and look at them so that you have a better understanding of different ways of looking at art. The philosophers divide up into 3 categories, 3 sort of units. The first group of philosophers is thinking about the relationship between art and reality. That's where you get somebody saying, is it realistic or not, right? Art should copy reality. So we'll talk about the relationship between art and reality. That's the first unit. It's the very first thing we're going to do. And after about a month on that, we're going to look at the second unit. And the second unit is the relationship between art and authors. Again, that's where you get that perspective that says a poem or a song is an emotional expression of the author. And it's like they're expressing how they feel. That is something you're saying. The meaning of art in that case is its relationship to the author, right? If you're saying is it realistic or not, then the meaning of art is in its relationship to reality. If you say it's an emotional expression of the author, then you're saying the meaning of art is it has to do with the author. So unit 2 is art and authors. We're going to look at several people talking about the relationship between art and authors. And then the third unit is art and audiences. Which is to say that the meaning, if you want to understand a piece of art, you have to understand its relationship to the audience that's looking at it. What does it do to them? What does it do for them? And we have a stack of philosophers, and we'll look at that too. Most people don't like to think about that, and I'll talk more about why. So that's the class. We're going to go through those philosophers and those units, and we're just going to go week by week, spend like a week on each one, and just kind of make our way through different perspectives on art. And that is the class. So I hope that you enjoy it, and welcome to class. That's what it is. It's going to be a bunch of YouTube videos talking about that stuff, and then you guys are going to discuss the YouTube videos on the discussion board. So, okay, that's it.